Hello and welcome to Avenge This, a show where if we can't predict the twist, you can be damn sure we'll avenge it. Valentine's Day only means one thing around these parts, and that means that Todd and I drug our wives to see a midnight release of the latest Marvel movie in hopes they'd still love us after. This year, that movie was Captain America: Brave New World. So here's your spoiler warning for the rest of this episode. If you haven't seen Captain for America yet and you don't want to have it spoiled for you, please exit the elevator now. Because we've yet to be able to convince our wives to do this podcast with us, the only person joining me today is Todd. Hey, is that the thing from the Eternals? Thomas? Todd, your initial thoughts on Cap 4?
I do. I want to square this back up. I mean, you laid a pretty good groundwork here, and only one person on this call has taken their partner to a midnight showing of a different Marvel movie on Valentine's Day. And that's you, and it was Madam Web. And so
I'm pretty sure that we did this together for Deadpool. I feel like we did this for Deadpool, the first one.
You know what? You might be onto something.
There's precedent.
That could be a thing. You did ask a question though. What are the initial thoughts? I think that people are going to dunk on this online. What I have said to people is I think this was a comic book movie that watched like a comic book. It had action, it had some twists, had like a mid villain, an end villain, a villain behind the scenes. It had all the pieces of the puzzle. And anyone who wants to hate on this movie can go kick rocks, because I actually really liked the action scenes. And I thought it was cool that we had a bunch of flying dogfights, and that the ending wasn't necessarily power of friendship that beat Red Hulk, but it also wasn't not the power of friendship. And I think that's cool. I liked the movie. It wasn't the best movie. It didn't quite capture Winter Soldier espionage vibes, but yeah, it's a movie that I did not dislike going to see. I've walked out of other movies and been like, the fuck did I just watch? And that wasn't the case here.
Yeah, I agree on all accounts. I was surprised that this movie got panned quite as hard as it did by critics.
Yeah.
I thought it was fine. I think that maybe we need to expect a little bit less out of the MCU as far as like scale of a movie. This felt, like you said, like a comic book movie. I didn't feel like I needed to have watched 30 other movies to understand it. I felt like the story was pretty contained in the movie, and I understood what we were doing. And like you said, I thought the action scenes were really fun. I thought this movie looked pretty good for some of the other Marvel movies we've seen in the last 5 years. So, that's really how I felt about it. But I want to move on. If you are new to Avenge This, we actually picked this up from our Patreon show where we talk about Disney Channel original movies. So you can find out more about that at patreon.com if you want, patreon.com/debatethiscast. But we do these things called Disney Vader pitches, where we try to basically summarize the movie in as few words as possible. And so, Todd, I would love it if you could break down Captain America: Brave New World in as few words as possible for me whenever you are ready.
16 years later, we get a payoff for an Edward Norton Hulk movie with no Hulk in sight that's green.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to share, Kyle's not on the show today, but he put something in our group chat that was a review of this movie. And I wanted to share it with the crowd. This is by Zoe Rose Bryant, user on a website that Kyle screenshotted, and I don't know what it is. A movie that imagines a world where the president is a giant red rage monster with a controversial past being controlled by a socially awkward tech bro. And the least believable part is that said president is also a semi-redeemable human being.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. They did a Captain America movie. Captain America saved the U.S. government from looking terrible. That seems to be the theme of Captain America movies, which I don't love, but there could be worse.
Yeah, that's always the problem with Captain America movies. It either ends up being, hey, let's all cheer for the U.S. government, or the U.S. government is bad, but not all the government, just only like parts of the government. The rest of the government good, just some parts bad. And yeah, that's always tricky when you have a character who is wearing the stars and stripes, like you're probably gonna have some of that.
Yeah, is literally called Captain America, and
Hmm.
I think especially in the year 2025, it's a hot time for a movie of said relevance to come out. Anyway, something else that I want to talk about that isn't that. Um, they did a lot of reshoots for this movie. We've been hearing about Captain America 4 for like a million years. And this is not uncommon with Disney Marvel. We've definitely come to expect lots of things happen in reshoots, but I don't know that we've had something that the public has known was reshot quite as heavily as this movie since Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah,
And
man.
so I wanted to ask you if you felt like this movie was kind of Frankenstein together, or if you weren't taking out of the moment at all about that. And also, where do you rank this as far as Falcon and the Winter Soldier goes?
Yeah, I think I'm a freak. I like reading about all the stuff that you just referenced. That it happened in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like you just said. It happens now. I like paying attention to when they say they're doing reshoots or when there's a new announcement of a new cast or a change, or an actor or actress that is queued up to be something suddenly shares they're not, aka Seth Rollins' character nowhere to be found in this movie. So I think if I wasn't an absolute terminally online person, then I wouldn't have known anything. To the average viewer who isn't necessarily trying to read between the lines, you're probably not catching that things are off. Whereas in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, if you were just kind of paying attention, you saw there were some weird cuts, some ADRs, some some language and sentences from the same character that are different tones, one scene after another, where that character is not on the screen, but they're still talking. So I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier got a worse version of that, kind of the reshoots. But I thought it was a complete movie, but the reshoots were real. I mean, like I said, Seth Rollins, WWE wrestler, was supposed to be part of the Serpent Society, nowhere to be found. Giancarlo Esposito's character, Sidewinder, was all part of the reshoots. He wasn't in the initial lineup. And it's pretty obvious if you kind of pick that apart. All the scenes that Esposito's in were either inside the church sanctuary fight early on, which apparently is the same Atlanta set from Loki season 1.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, there's the like early on in Loki season 1 where they find like that blue chewing gum.
Yeah, in the French
in a scene.
church, I think.
Yep, that is apparently that same set.
Huh, that's fun.
So like there's a closed set with Giancarlo Esposito playing his character. The other big scenes were junkyard. So I mean, once you kind of read between the lines, you see all those things. Same thing with what's her face, the character Shira Haas, who played Ruth Bat Sephiroth, Seraph. Yeah, that's it.
Ruth Bat Seraph.
Yes, whole thing around her. I don't know if you've got it further in here, but like a type 2 on her situation. So she is effectively Israel's Captain America. I forget what her. I had it. Sabra. Sabra is her name.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, and so obviously, Israel's not a place that we want to represent in any positive light. But Disney kind of already had their foot in that camp, and so they stripped away a lot of her character in that regard. However, when you see her towards the end of the movie, she's still got her super suit on that they were going to give her, but she's got like a trench coat over it. So yeah, I think that this didn't necessarily fall victim of reshoots, but I'm also curious to know what all was cut, which at least includes some sort of funeral. Because if you remember from all the previews, there was a funeral scene teased that we never got to see. So I'm curious what the original cut of this movie was that didn't get a good review, that took them down the road of bringing Giancarlo Esposito in, potentially giving him a Disney Plus series down the line. Like, we're going to see him again.
It sure feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, a victim of reshoots. Did it end up as a better movie? I got to assume, but it doesn't feel like it was patchwork quilted together like Falcon and the Winter Soldier was.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think it would be super interesting to hear what got cut, what didn't make it through. I think the biggest public story as far as why all these reshoots happened was that they did a test screening and everybody hated it. And so they reshot a bunch of stuff and reworked the movie. And I didn't walk out of that movie feeling like, oh, well, that's a movie that clearly everybody hated. So I feel like they put together something good. And a lot of Marvel movies, not just Disney Marvel, but like Sony Marvel as well, over the last 5 or so years have felt a little patchwork. The story hasn't felt clear and connected. And like, honestly, I felt like this movie did not have a lot of gaping plot holes the way some other Marvel movies have. Like, it was very straightforward. It was maybe a little too linear at times, but like things made sense. I wasn't asking myself like, how did Dakota Johnson fly to Peru this week? Like, she's the most wanted person in the country. You know, I think that they did a good job putting the movie together. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier always feels like, oh man, this could have been great. And Captain America 4 felt a little more like, this could have been something else, but I don't hate what we got. So,
I was happy with it. Both my wife and I, like, afterwards, because I kind of gauge like, how does she like the movie? Because she's not a big freak like I am. And, she was like, yeah, it was good. Like, it was a good story. I think it was, for her, it was easy to follow. And I don't know if she watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but, aside from me saying like, oh, Samuel Stearns, this guy matters because of this, and you're not going to know that necessarily. The one thing that I think was a big bummer, that obviously like early views didn't give it good reviews. They did reshoots. Obviously it wasn't a surprise to anyone that the Red Hulk was there at the end, but man, what if it could have been?
Yeah.
We obviously saw the transformation early. They wanted people to go to the movie. They had to show that. But knowing that was kind of the big climax of the movie, there's part of me that was like, that would have been so cool to not have seen that coming.
I totally agree. Whether it was that or they had not teased the leader at all, I think people had pieced together Samuel Stearns as a villain from pretty early trailer footage. And so I do think it would have been cool. Like, this movie felt like it was missing a reveal. I think the only reveal we got was, and again, spoiler alert, if you made it this far, Bucky Barnes showing up while Joaquin Torres is in the hospital. And like, that's a fun cameo. I didn't dislike that, but it's certainly not a third act reveal for a big budget Marvel movie, for a Captain America movie,
Right.
So the other thing that was interesting, like you said, you kind of had to explain to your wife, like, oh, this is that guy from a movie that came out 16 years ago. Like, it brought back a bunch of stuff we haven't seen in a long time. Obviously, Tiamat, the giant celestial island that we haven't seen since Eternals, but also General Ross, who we haven't seen since Black Widow, and Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, who we haven't seen since 2008. 2008, 2009, Incredible Hulk. So how did you like these callbacks opposed to what I feel like is the recent trend of calls forward? I feel like we've spent the last couple of years in Marvel saying like, oh, that's that guy in X number of movies. He's going to be this guy. It was kind of interesting to say, oh, no, that's the thing from 5 movies ago. So what did you think of that?
Yeah, man. No more gulp shittos. Like, stop giving me. Right now, we've had about a half a dozen to a dozen teased characters at the end of shows and movies that there's just no concrete plans for. And so I will gladly take an appearance from a character in the past that makes their cameo, does whatever. Like, that's fun to me. Liv Tyler's, towards the end, like, that's really cool. Obviously, it was great. General Ross, I thought Harrison Ford did a good job.
I did too.
And dude is so real. We on the show, kind of offline, have talked about how and I think even online, that they backed up a dump truck full of cash and put it in his front lawn and said, hey man, we need you to wear a military suit for 90% of this movie, and then we're going to mocap you for everything else, where you're just going to grunt and punch. And Harrison Ford said, how many zeros are on that? Okay, you got it. And I think dude was into it. Dude played a good version of General Ross. Obviously with William Hurt passing away a couple years ago, I think it was good that Marvel just went ahead and recast and kind of kept going. So that was a fun callback. Hey, glad to get a little bit of closure on Tiamat. Pretty cool that, after whenever Eternals came out, this is the first time we've really got Tiamat talked about, aside from like small cameos and newspaper clippings. Them making Tiamat made of adamantium, sure,
why not?
And I love that they're prepping adamantium as like a miracle metal that'll solve everything. So that's cool. Also, what I do really like is that calling it Celestial Island as like a foreign land that needs to be shared or fought over.
Yeah.
That was really, really neat to me, that they are like, okay, this actually exists and is a thing now.
I liked that this movie was not a 95-minute movie about adamantium. I was a little afraid it was going to be.
I was convinced his final suit was going to be made out of adamantium.
I was too. I thought that was going to be the big upgrade, was like Captain America takes adamantium to Wakanda and Shuri makes him an adamantium suit or something like that, and I'm glad that was not the case. I do think it's really interesting that the message of this movie is that the major world powers have signed a big old treaty so everybody can get this new miracle element. That is definitely interesting. But as far as like callbacks and stuff, it's nice that we saw it again. I think that it's really interesting that this movie kind of exists in a bubble. It's like outside of the post-credit scene, they didn't talk about any of the multiverse stuff or like any of the mystic stuff, all the other things that we've been doing in Marvel for years. This was like, oh yeah, by the way, there's a man-sized island or a man-shaped island in the Indian Ocean. It's made of mystic metal and not much else. I did feel like this movie was a little bit more about General Ross than I would have wanted it to. But also, you bag Harrison Ford for a movie and you milk that for all it's worth.
Right. You're going to just keep letting him grunt and point.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of Harrison Ford, you brought up the Red Hulk. I want to devote a question to the three villains of this movie. It's not even really a question. I just want to talk about the three villains of this movie.
Yeah, man.
Those being Samuel Stearns, the leader, General Red Hulk, and Giancarlo Esposito, Sidewinder, in whatever order, in whatever way you so choose.
Yeah, let's go with the low-hanging fruit real quick. Serpent Society is a cool, like, Captain America-centric rogues gallery. Like, they are the ones that... there was a tease back before Captain America 3 Civil War that it was going to be called Serpent Society and that was like the heyday of Marvel releasing names of movies. And then K-Fi was like, LOL JK, it's Civil War. Clean up your seats when you leave, nerds. And so, like, Serpent Society's been teased for a while. They're, a team of villains with serpent-like names and sometimes serpent powers, I guess. I don't know. There was, I think in Luke Cage, Diamondback is also sometimes part of the Serpent Society. But the point being, I think Giancarlo Esposito did a good job as, like, I'm the mercenary doing this stuff. I don't want a series of the Serpent Society, but whatever. I'm cool with them. I'll tell you what their purpose is. Their purpose is effectively what Crossbones did at the beginning of Civil War.
Yep.
They are the ones that are grounded heroes, are introduced in the movie, beating up on, and then 10 minutes later, the plot gets going. And I'm so good with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the first person Galactus eats is Giancarlo Esposito. Like,
right, exactly. Like, I'm so fine with that. So switching over to Samuel Stearns, the leader, which Tim Blake Nelson back as the leader after, again, 16 years.
And I think really crushed it. I really loved him. Yeah.
Yeah, if you so friends, if you've watched the movie and haven't seen what the leader typically looks like in comic books, at best, he looks like a bigger headed version of Sinestro from like DC,
Yeah, but green.
but green. At worst, he's a green dude with a wrinkly brain head. And I think they did a really good job being like, hey, this man got exposed to gamma radiation in not a cool, sexy, fun way.
Uh-huh.
And it has made him the smartest human being on earth. I was listening to a new Rockstars video today, and they made the comparison that him being able to see all probabilities is similar to like what Doctor Strange did with the Time Stone, where he could like trace paths to see what would happen.
Yeah.
You know, Samuel Stern's character can actually just figure out the logic to every single decision and possibility. And I think they did a really good job with a dude who's really smart, who knows and sees everything and makes contingency plans accordingly. But obviously, not every decision is certain. And wouldn't you know it, the heroes are going to defy your outlier percentages. And Red Hulk, man, the only thing that I have to complain about Red Hulk is I'll just be so sad if we never get to see Red Hulk and the Hulk at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain about, this is a Captain America movie with a bunch of Hulk villains. Like, people can get really mad about that if they want to. Villains end up everywhere all the time. And Red Hulk has been obviously part of the Thunderbolts, and I think he's even been an Avenger at some point. But my only complaint is I would like to see him again. And I would love to see just like a Hulk team him up, because again, how do you do Thunderbolt Ross, Betty Ross, all the stuff tied to Bruce Banner without ever seeing Bruce Banner? And knowing that we've had, what's his face? Tim Roth's Abomination.
Yeah.
We've even had Abomination back in the game. And so all the pieces are there to like put kind of a bow on a Hulk story. And so I do hope that we get that. And that's really the only complaint I have about Red Hulk. We didn't see a ton of his heat powers, but we saw a little bit, like his clothes melted off of him. And you know what? Save some for the next time.
Yeah, totally. I thought that they did the angrier he is, the hotter he gets tastefully. I feel like if they would have just had like flame-throwing Hulk in movie one, it would have been a lot.
Yeah.
It does feel a little weird knowing that like Harrison Ford is also 1,000,000 years old and these movies take time to come out. Like, what are we doing? World War Hulk in 2030? Are we still getting Harrison Ford into the mocap suit? Like, what are we doing?
I mean, the good news is that like it obviously doesn't take much out of him. Well, that's me saying that as a person I've never filmed a movie.
Sure.
But, he doesn't have to go through a ton of makeup. His costume is suit or military outfit or prison suit. And obviously mocap is not going to be as physically demanding as the stuff that, any other physical actor is doing. So that gives me a good amount of hope that they could get him for a little bit. But again, like you said, he's 1,000,000 years old. He's not going to do this for 20 years.
Yeah. I think that Red Hulk would have been cooler had we not known he was coming, but we already talked about that, and I won't double down on it. I thought that Giancarlo Esposito's Sidewinder was a more like movie my dad likes type take on Sidewinder than WWE's Seth Rollins probably would have been. Because my understanding is that it was effectively, they were both going to be Sidewinder or leader of the Serpent Society, but it was, a completely different. They didn't use a pro wrestler. They used a like tactician and old military guy. Right. So
yep.
I think that that's fine. I'm pretty hit or miss on it. Honestly, I really like the leader and I hope that we get more of him. He reminded me a little bit less of the leader from the comics and a little bit more of the mad thinker from the comics, who is just different, the leader. But Mad Thinker does a lot of like, he talks in probabilities all the time. And I thought that was really interesting. And I hope that we get more of him going forward. I really liked Tim Blake Nelson. And I really liked the makeup that they did on him. I thought the effects looked cool. I thought that it was a really good body horror that was believable and not, like CGI kaiju levels of crazy. Plus, we don't have to see him like walking around with a big foam head or something like that, because that'd be too much. All right. Well, I have a few more things for us to talk about, but we're going to take a quick break and we will be back right after this. All right, welcome back. I feel like the only characters we haven't really talked about yet, we've mentioned them a little bit, but are the side characters, sort of the sidekicks of this movie. You've got Joaquin Torres as the Falcon, and you've got Ruth Bat-Saraf as former Black Widow agent Ruth Bat-Saraf.
Right.
What did you think of these characters? Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, it's cool. So I'll start with Ruth Bat-Saraf first. That I think they did a good job being like, this is an ex-Black Widow who's risen to the level of like defense advisor, security advisor. I think that's cool. That's cool lore. I love the fact that, they're able to tie something to a thing in the past. They're also able to say like, oh, she trained in the Red Room. Like, she's not going to fuck around. That was pretty cool. Also glad they didn't give us Captain Israel. That's super cool.
That would have been tough. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, glad we didn't. I love Joaquin Torres. He was fun. I really like when they go back to a main character story from an Avengers story and they show you all the supporting characters. And Joaquin did a good job with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought Joaquin was really fun, did a really good job of coming out of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which just didn't really set him up for much of anything. And I thought became a really fun character. I really liked Ruth Bat-Saraf. I thought that it was really cool and like a really interesting idea to, here is a former widow who is now with the American government, which is distinctly not better, just a little different. And I thought it was fun that she was like, I kind of want to bag Bucky Barnes. That sounds like a good time. And yeah, I don't know. I liked her. I thought Shira Haas did a really good job. And obviously, it always sucks when a character is concepted one way and then has to change for a reason external of making that movie. And I'm not saying that they should have kept Captain Israel. That'd be a silly thing to say, and I'm not going to say it. But I do think it's always a bummer when it's like, oh, well, our original idea was this, because I'm sure the original idea had a lot more behind it. And what we got was fine, but also kind of like, I think there was one line where it's like, she's from Israel. She trained in the Red Room. End of backstory. And whatever. All right. This movie ends with Captain America, Sam Wilson, and the Falcon, Joaquin Torres, high-fiving and saying we did it at Joaquin Torres's hospital room. And then Sam Wilson says, well, god darn it, Joaquin, I'ma build the Avengers. Which I think was an excellent Anthony Mackie impression. Todd, my question for you, who are the Avengers? Who is he assembling? Who do you want him to assemble? Go ahead.
Dude, I'm gonna take a brief answer, and I'm gonna kind of cop out on this one. That I think it's Shang-Chi. I think that's an easy get. It's got to be Bruce Banner to some capacity, and other than that, I really don't know. I don't have a good answer because I don't know if we just really don't know right now. But those are the ones that I can call pretty easily. I mean, Doctor Strange probably falls into there somewhere, but I just really want to see more Shang-Chi. That's all I want.
Yep. I also really just want more Shang-Chi. I think my best guess is the people that we saw in Shang-Chi's post-credit scene. So
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, Wong,
Easy.
Hulk, Captain Marvel, and probably someone from Wakanda. Not 100% sure who at this point, but probably
TBD.
somebody. I think maybe we have a better idea of that after the Avenger or after Thunderbolts in May. It honestly felt a little empty. Kind of like I said at the top, this movie seemed to exist in a world where we haven't been talking about the multiverse for 5 years. And so
Right.
it felt a little bit like you're going to build the Avengers. That seems like maybe not the priority right now, my guy.
Maybe you need to put your eyes up a little bit. That seems low.
Doctor Strange cut a hole in space. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see how that comes back, if it does. Yeah, kind of my last thing I want to do here. We don't have to rank every single movie since Endgame, but I want to know for you where Captain America 4 sits in relativity. You know, is this high on your list post Endgame? Is it low on your list post Endgame? Where are you at?
I think it rides right around in the middle. Like this is a movie that I would use as a barometer of movies that are better than this one. I would say are good movies. Movies that are worse than this one are bad movies. If we were using our DCOM ranking, this is like an Eddie Millie Dolly Cooksey. Like this is like mid tier.
Yeah,
and we use it as a judge for others.
I think that's a pretty fair take. This movie was good, not great. And I didn't feel like I walked out justifying a bunch of stuff. So I would say maybe it's at the bottom of my top half or the top of my bottom half. But I like it kind of right in the middle. Well, before we wrap up here, any thoughts? This movie doesn't set up much. We get one post-credit scene where Samuel Stearns basically says, "Fuck you, Captain America, the multiverse," and that's the end. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I hope that he's referring to the others as in other worlds colliding into this one. I love that the most. Also, if the two teases we got at the end of this was other worlds are going to smash into yours, so buckle the fuck up. Like, I love that. And if the other lead is, I got to find me some Avengers. Cool. Those are the two things I needed from this movie. I'm good with it.
Yeah. Way to sum it up perfectly. I didn't really want more from this movie.
Yeah.
I wanted exactly those two things. I wanted them to say Captain America is back on the scene and rebuilding the Avengers. Also, there is a multiversal war coming, period. And we got those two things. I think it would be really cool if we got more of Samuel Stearns, the leader, in some sort of like, you know, he's basically in the same place he started this movie. He's in government custody. And I remember the other thing I actually wanted to talk about. Not like huge or crazy. Who the hell's the president? They never mention
great question.
Who the vice president is. And
put a leadership vacuum in place when we've got a kingpin on the rise.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only thing I could think of.
I was kind of wondering if it somehow ends up being Val. She's
like the Secretary of State right now, I think, or Defense Secretary, or
head of the CIA in Wakanda Forever.
There it
is. I think. I mean, they never even make any mention as to who.
I bet they'll talk about it in Thunderbolts.
I would think
because there's definitely there's a testifying in front of Congress scene.
Yeah, and I feel like I heard that Thunderbolts happens a year-ish after Cap 4. I don't know that for certain. I don't know where I heard that, but that sounds like something I've heard before. So I could see, you know, there is certainly a power vacuum. He said, I'm not going to be the president anymore, and that's got to mean something to somebody somewhere, but I really don't know who. I don't have any other phenomenal ideas outside of Val. I mean, President Ritson from Secret Invasion was a big old nothing burger, and he didn't matter to anybody about anything. So, yeah, that's kind of my biggest question from this movie, I guess, is like, I don't know who the president is right now, and that feels relevant with a multiversal war coming, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening in to Avenge This, a show brought to you by the nerds that debate this. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe to Avenge This Podcast. The Avenge This Podcast. There's a V there, and I never read it. Wherever you get podcasts, because that's where you can find recaps of movies and shows from the MCU and also sometimes the DCCU and maybe some other stuff, basically just kind of whenever we want. Until next time, I'm Matt Cole.
I'm Todd. Bucky's 110 years old like everyone else in Congress. Thomas.
Oof. And hey, catch us next time, probably sometime in April, talking about Daredevil, maybe. All right. See ya.